When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.
Yeah. Let's get into it, bud.
Season 2.
Season 2, episode, I believe, 8. And in this episode, we are going to cover a bit of the news. Obviously, Russia just officially invaded Ukraine last night. So that has big ramifications. We're also going to do a Q&A. A lot of you have been reaching out. We really love when you reach out with comments because it's easier for us to see the comments. So these are some questions. We're going to go through those. We're also going to continue on from our last episode where we talked about how to value land, how to think about land.
Now how to build on that land.
Yeah, how to build on that land once you've managed to secure it. Check out that previous episode if you want to hear a bit more about that. But to start off, Neal, man, what's going on?
Not much. I don't know if it's crazy. I'm looking at your list of things. You got some stuff popping off. I've been kind of quiet. Yeah. I'm still working on that 6 unit that I've been working on for about 300 years. It's on the street that I already own. I see.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? There's been a few that have come across the table, but I'm really questioning what the play is right now. There's a couple different development sites that I'm looking at, as well as a few older buildings, and it's trying to navigate the rules that are going in and how that's going to impact what to build. Like I'm debating apartments. I know we talked about it last time. I was looking at a 100 unit and a 60 unit, still looking at those. I've met with the builder to try and get some pricing, and it's absurd how much it costs to build now.
Yeah, I mean, I know we both deal with Lindsay Construction. Shout out Lindsay Construction. And they're fantastic to consult with because they do some of these massings, and they can give you a rough idea early on in the process.
Pretty quick.
We talked about in land how your due diligence changes. You're not obviously getting home inspections. You're talking to planners, and shout outs to Chris, who commented, one of the things you should do when you're buying land is to consult with a planner. 100% right. Chris is a good buddy, business partner on some endeavors, client, friend, all that good stuff, and incredibly smart. And he's so right on that. Yeah. Consult with the planner.
It's part of the due diligence, and they're good for that. And to be honest with you, this is a prime example of that. So before going through with the purchase, I did meet with them, and they ran a preliminary budget. It's a high level, and obviously it's not necessarily super accurate, plus minus probably like 25, 30%, but it still came in higher cost to build, not including the land, than the end value appraisal.
Yeah, and part of that end value appraisal is driven by location, but the location doesn't, the cost of materials doesn't care about the location. It's the same price to build no matter where it is, but we all know it's worth more in one location than another.
Yeah, it was a substantial difference. Without land, the building appraised at, with land in the building, it appraised completed $30 million for
100 units.
For 100 units,
yeah. So 300 a door.
The construction cost was $35 million.
Yeah,
not including land.
350 door, not including land. HST included though.
HST included.
Yeah, and again, they would have built in a.
There's a buffer there.
There's a buffer there. I mean, even in their more pinned down estimates, you start kind of with a 10% contingency, and then when you actually put it to tender, you narrow that down. Still, I mean, and that's also just a couple points here and there from the change in that price. Yeah. So
that, and I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed to get the price down. Like we realized with the drawings, the layouts, that we could change a lot of things to get some efficiencies and save on money. But it was just interesting to see that it's not like, oh, you get land, just build everything you can build because it's going to make you money. It's getting to the point now. I think there was a sweet spot there for a few years where you could do it and get away with it. And now, unfortunately, it's gotten to the point where you got to be a lot more selective with what you do because you might not necessarily make your money back.
If you finished a building and brought it to market 36 months ago, you were just crushing it. Yes. Because cost of construction was still reasonable. The price per door for the land, you probably got a good deal on.
Rents were
strong.
No rules.
Yeah, it was the good old days.
Those were the good old days.
So you've got a couple projects coming across your desk, navigating through those.
Yeah.
You're also working on some things in your neck of the woods, like you said. What's the hold up there?
Yeah. So you mean like on land deals?
No. Like you had a couple buildings.
Oh, yeah. So the ones that I have under contract, it's more so environmental concerns. The neighborhood that I'm in, when it was built, all the multi-units there had underground oil tanks. So I'm basically dealing with the repercussions of that. I actually had drillers out there today. So they were drilling test holes to see how far the contaminants go, when it's going to take to remediate. We've had to vacate a bunch of units in the basements as well because we're going to actually probably end up having to tear up some of the basements to get the contaminant out. But it's I think the frustrating part, it's not even the cost, it's the time.
Yeah.
Everything, it's like, okay, so you now need to contact the city 3.5 weeks. Okay, and then once you get that, they have to write a report for 2.5 weeks. Then they need to drill a hole in the ground and then monitor that for 4 months. And then we give you a rough idea to get an answer. And it's still not a guarantee. And then we have to schedule all the stuff in to dig it out and work on it and then approve it. And and then close it, and then monitor it again for another 4 months to confirm that we actually did clean it, and then maybe we can give you a stamp of approval. All the while, a regular grade A bank is not going to finance you
they
for
have
that.
no interest in that. They're like, oh, so you're telling me it's contaminated and you won't have rent for 12 months?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah. So it's the timeline that's killer. I wish there was just like they put a dollar amount on it and you could just blast it off. But anyways, I think fortunately it's not as bad as I expected. But it's, again, just the timeline is absolutely killer.
Well, the price of oil is going up so much, you should just bottle it.
Well, this is what I'm thinking. I think I'm going to clean the soil, and I might actually get my costs back through what's in the ground.
There you go. Should mention this show is not giving investment advice. We're told we need some sort of disclaimer.
Yeah, we need a little disclaimer. We are not professional registered investment advisors on any front. We're realtors, which is clearly not an investment advisor. We're just sharing our opinions, and if you want to consult, we should consult professional advice before making any decisions.
Having said that, Neal was very much right about the price of oil. We're going to get into the news in a second, but oil's up like 10% because, sadly...
Check the last reel from 2 weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was that we talked about it. Neal may have mentioned that some crap was going down in Russia, and it may be a good time to buy some oil-based investments. And if you did that, you probably made 10 to 20% in the last week. Just throwing it out there.
I love how Neal references the situation. You said if things pop off between Russia and Ukraine, and he said there's some crap going on over in Russia.
I would say Putin's popping off.
So we're also not geopoliticists, but geopolitical.
Yeah, we're not
either.
diving into that.
But you were right. What else is going on? You were just away.
Yeah, so I went on a little trip. I went back out west. I think I've been out west a few times since we started the pod, but it was crazy to see because I went to Revelstoke and like. It's similar to Halifax in the sense that their real estate markets are insanely high, like crazy high. Like to buy a new home there, it's a couple $1 million. To buy like a proper like big house, like a lakefront house would be $5-10 million. It's crazy numbers, right. And it's because of like the availability of the land. It's similar to what we face in Halifax with the peninsula, where the shape of it forces the values up because you can't go outwards unless you go to a different area, which really screws up traffic and lengths of time to get to places. These towns, which are wedged between mountains, what are you gonna do? You can't build up the sides of the mountains. So the little flat spots that make these towns up become ultra valuable. Like there's just nowhere that you can go from there. And so a lot of times you see like a place like Banff, it fills out. There's nowhere else for them to go because either the land's protected or not available. And then you get these little auxiliary towns as they start to get bigger, but they're half an hour away, 45 minutes away. And
then as per our last episode, and we'll talk a little bit about this today too, is if the end home is worth $2 million, and it costs $850,000 to build that home, the land is going to go on the market for $1.15 million.
Exactly, and that's what happens with a stabilized market. And it's the same thing. Again, I was there. I tried to look at some multi-units. They've already had their boom and bust a few times in the past due to oil, and they've just stabilized now. All their units just trade at a stabilized value. Everyone knows what they are. You buy them for a standardized return. You're not finding as many of these massive lift deals. And yeah, exactly. Same thing with the land. People are seeing, it costs $850K to build. The house is worth $2 million. The land's gonna sell for $1 million. Yeah. So a lot of times these places you have to play a little bit of a longer term game, and you're starting to see that in Atlantic Canada now too. Where I had a call just before we came in here, and he's like, "What are people paying? Like, what's the cap rate, or what are they paying for land?" And I'm like, "People are no longer buying to get a return in 12 months. They're looking to get a return in 60 months. Yeah. Everything's a 5-year play now. Even being able to get all your money back on a refinance is substantially reduced now.
Mm-hmm. It's also changing how people are valuing existing stock because, there's so much value in the land. It's like, all right, how much home is here? Does it make sense to kind of tear down the existing home or renovate the existing home and so on and so forth? But anything else going on?
No, I don't have anything too crazy. I think once I get one of these development sites, I threw a few offers out on some other sites. I won't get into them until I get them. But I think we've talked about it a few times. I want to make the transition, but now I'm feeling nervous just with the cost of construction, and also with the rules that are going in. Like it changes the market dramatically if you can't increase rents, right? Like especially like if you build an apartment, even if it's brand new, so you get to set your initial rents. But next year, I'm going to tell you right now, your costs are going to go up by more than 2%. And the year after, they're going to go up by more than 2%. Yeah. So if they start continuing that, and in other places they have rent controls at 1.2% or 1.5%, it's almost impossible to start making money out of these buildings. Eventually, they go negative, right? So that's where we had this conversation last week of just, does it start to make sense to build condos? Because when you look in Ontario's market, the day that rent control went in, not day, but the 5 years within rent control going in, their condo market and condo construction went skyrocketed,
Yeah.
and their rental apartment construction actually dropped. And it actually ended up causing rents to go up more because now they're all private owner, and condos trade at a higher value than apartments do.
Absolutely. And you aren't necessarily reliant on new people coming to the city to say move condo stock. I mean, it certainly helps, but with the rental market, you're heavily reliant on increasing population into the city. But with a condo, you could conceivably sell it to someone who's just looking to move place to place in the city, and then they can individually rent those should they choose, and you're not subject to the kind of rent control. But
what do you got
super
going on?
interesting. So I got that property in the South Shore under contract, working with some partners and planners. Very, very important to know exactly what we can do there, and it's really exciting. It looks even maybe a little bit better than we initially thought.
Nice.
What's that?
Nice.
Yeah. So also I'm excited by the type of construction. We'd be looking to do effectively 3-level townhouses.
Like stacked townhomes.
Yeah, stacked townhomes in 3 different phases perhaps. So you're bringing your cost of construction way down, not necessarily per square foot, even though you are to some degree, but it's more so you could do it in phases and there's less units and so on. So it's a manageable project to bite
size
off.
that way,
Yeah. And I love Lunenburg, so that's exciting. What else? I've got a letter of intent going in on a 60-unit site. That does have an existing structure on it, which will help with the financing. It's a commercial structure, though. It's probably going to require 35% down, so I may be talking to the seller. I'll require a vendor take back on that particular one.
Yep.
And then still working through some due diligence on that collection of parcels there. And one of the things that came up in consultation with the planner is that not only am I restricted there height-wise, which I knew already, but because it's near certain public spaces, there's also shadow requirements. These are these little things that when you see the site and someone does a massing and says, I don't know, you can do about this here, but this is a high-level valuation, right? You get into weird things like that.
On that same topic, and I meant to bring this up, prices of real estate in these little valley towns are absurd. You'll never see a tall building.
Yep.
You're going to block the view of the mountains.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That's why you're never allowed to build up. Even though like a low-rise condo will trade for $1 million, 1,200 square feet, they are not allowed. I'm sure developers love to put 80 stories in there, but you're not allowed because it'll impact the view of the mountains.
Well, we are right beside something here that anyone who's familiar with downtown planning in Halifax, there is a sight line to Citadel Hill, from Citadel Hill to the water, that there's a strip of the town where you can't build over a certain height, and people out of
Just
town
in case of
think
invasion,
that's so
they need
crazy.
to shoot cannonballs down.
Yeah, nobody takes the fort.
Yeah.
I remember when Little learning that it had never been defeated. It was also never attacked, but it was never defeated. But nobody takes the fort. And then I'm kind of hoping to pick up a 12-unit building there. I think I touched on that a bit before. So a few things going on, exciting times, got to figure out the money side of stuff. But let's dive into a little bit of news. We touched on it, obviously.
The biggest one.
Yeah, I mean, when people watch this episode, we don't know. We could.
By the time we say
escalated.
this,
Could
have escalated, could be done. Sounds like they're moving pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to say, but I can't imagine Ukraine's going to put up a long, drawn-out resistance, at least from a.
It would be, I think, it
military
would be
control
damaging to the country to try and fight back against a superpower. But it seems like Putin's got a pretty strong mission to make the move. Again, I think for me, out of this, the biggest thing that I was kind of watching is just how it's going to impact the market. As terrible as it is, it can be a huge spur for economy for all these countries in the EU that are going to be spending a ton of money to go over there.
Well, the EU is now almost immediately they started towards a plan towards more renewable energy sources, alternative energy sources, to get off the reliance on Russia, because historically most of the EU was reliant on Russia for oil, and even up until recently, Germany was working on a major pipeline to Russia, which has now been halted.
Kiboshed, yeah.
And of course, the first thing they admitted was like, oh, maybe we should have done this years ago, and that's always the way with renewable energy. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, people in the oil sector are doing fantastic. They're making lots of money off this currently.
Yep.
The rest of the market's getting crushed. It'll be curious to see what happens with some of these alternative energy, renewable energy sources. Maybe they'll go on a run. I mean, it's a exploratory
The response
field.
time is what I think gets lost.
Yeah.
It's not something that they can overnight establish.
Yeah,
It
they can't
takes
slap up those
years.
wind farms.
No, they can't slap up a wind farm. Solar is probably a little quicker, but even that takes a long, long time. Putting the infrastructure, the distribution, all that.
The adoption of it, yeah.
But this might be the push that is kind of required to help kind of get the ball really rolling on that side. I'll be very curious to see what happens with oil because everyone's kind of vowing to be like, all right, screw it, we're going to stop buying and trading and doing all these things with Russia in an effort to try and cool them. And in the event, it's going to, in turn, it's going to cause oil to increase, but at the same time, then production numbers are going to go nuts. And so I'll be curious to see how the response in production goes. And then eventually, I'm sure some sort of agreement will be struck and it'll cause things to come down. But how hard will it come down?
Yeah.
Right. So like, I think we might have a bit of a boom. I think we're already seeing it. The price of oil is quite close to its old historical highs. When you account for inflation, not quite, but it's there. But I'm just very curious to see kind of the progression moving forward, how stringent, like strict people get with not purchasing goods necessarily from Russia. And then the impact was what follows that, and how to also be careful for that because now it's not like oil is just going to be great forever. It's now
also it's great if you're invested in oil.
It is great if you're invested in oil.
It's terrible
if you're not
for everything else.
Everything else is going to cost more.
Petroleum is also a major input product. This is going to cause further inflation, and I mean it's going to be great for certain aspects of the American economy. Right,
yep.
The American economy makes a lot of money off of war and oil.
Yep.
But man, the redistribution of wealth is just going to continue to gap during this whole thing.
100%.
And crypto is getting killed also.
Yeah.
But it follows the market, and there's a big kind of connection between crypto and a lot of mining places in Russia and so on and so forth.
Continuing with cost increase,
yeah.
Bank of Canada increased their rates by 0.25%.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Not a huge amount, kind of what was expected, but there was an increase. That being said, I was actually just talking with some private bankers, and they were saying due to this, depending how it progresses in Russia, the next hike, which is supposed to be a half point in the next quarter, they might slow it down a little bit or do a little bit less because it might be too much impact at once to markets.
Yeah.
But again, something to watch for, even if they hold off for a quarter or two, rates are going to continue to go up because at the end of the day, there's still going to be that crazy amount of inflation. It's something to be careful of. Again, we've said this a bunch of times, but rates are cranking up, inflation's cranking up. I'd say keep an eye on things. Like we're going there. And
now returning to kind of daily life, COVID-wise, here in Nova Scotia, following pace with a bunch of other places in the country, a concrete plan has come out. Well, a moving target plan has come out from the government about phasing ourselves out of quarantine, out of whatever this craziness we've been living under.
Vaccine passports.
Yeah.
I can't believe they're removing that already.
Well, so when people watch, when people watch this episode, which will be the 28th of February, proof of vaccination is supposed to be removed for most activities, i.e. going to a restaurant, going into a sporting event. You'll no longer need to have that. March 7th, the gathering and capacity limits will increase. So, party on, let's go. You can have, weddings and things like that will be a little bit different. And then March 21st, all of the gathering limits, all the face masks, and all of the distancing will be lifted. I know this is a big thing for people with kids in school because the idea is when they come back from March break, the kids hopefully will not have to wear masks.
That's a huge change. It's been 2 years, literally 2 years basically exactly, and it's going back around.
Yeah.
I think there was intent to keep it for long-term care facilities and hospital stuff, which I think makes sense. I think that makes total sense.
And obviously, if you still want to, like my wife was like, you know what, I probably will still wear a mask in certain instances. And I think there'll be a lot of people who will operate that way individually
100%.
For quite some time.
Yeah.
And I could imagine seeing things where businesses, maybe restaurant industry, banking, things like that. I could see them maybe for a longer term keeping plastic screens up or keeping masks up.
I think a lot of the screens will stay, especially in some of these high volume places, like you said. I can definitely see it staying for a bit. But I think this is good progress because, again, the idea with all of this stuff was to not inundate our medical system. And I think they have a fairly good handle on it. When there is spikes, it gets a little out of hand. But I think there's starting to be some control and the potency, we'll say, of it's starting to go down. Yeah. So this is a good step forward to getting the economy to come back. Yeah. Because, again, we're taking a beating in a lot of other places. So this should hopefully help to re-encourage things. It also, Canada removed its requirements for a PCR test to get back in. Yeah. Which is honestly huge. I know a lot of people haven't traveled as much during COVID. But if you did, you will know that a PCR test, depending where you're going, to leave, costs $100 to $200. and then to come back could cost anywhere from $100 to $300.
Yeah.
So on top of it already being expensive, you're kind of getting a kick in the teeth, and you had to get them done within a certain period, 24 to 72 hours, which can be really tough because if you're traveling, sometimes you're in places that don't have all of that.
Yeah.
And so if you're flying on a Sunday,
Or you get delayed, or
or you don't get the results in time, whatever it may be, it was very difficult. I know a few times for myself to get back. That I think is going to be really good. And actually, I've seen a lot of articles saying that travel's already exploding. Like prices for flights in March have gone up 30%.
Yeah.
Which is good. It's funny though because at the same time oil's flying up. So it's probably going to be really, really expensive to travel midsummer.
Yeah, some of that is going to be the cost of flying the airplane.
Yeah.
It's going to be up quite a bit.
But it's a good step. We're slowly resuming into, I would say, normalcy and where we were.
Yeah, hopefully the supply chain starts increasing. Factories and construction places can get to full capacity. Even restaurants being able to stay open normal hours. It's going to be great for the economy, and hopefully everything goes nice and smoothly. So we're going to dive into some questions here.
Let's do questions.
We're going to whip through these sort of quickly. Hannah asked, they said, we're buying a duplex. One side is empty, and the other side is tenant occupied, with about 50% of the market rent. So they want to move into the tenant occupied side, which typically, as the purchaser of a home, you can fill out a Form DR2, the seller serves it to the tenant, et cetera, et cetera. These sellers are not willing to serve that Form DR2. So there's one unit vacant, there's one unit occupied. The purchaser, Hannah, wants to move into the occupied unit, and presumably rent the empty one at market rent, and perhaps even one day rent the other one at market rent. The challenge is that Form DR2, you're only allowed to serve that, it turns out,
when you're buying.
And there was a lot of confusion around this, myself included, that I thought that you could still apply the Form DR2 at any time. But that is specific only to the sale.
Almost
so the question...
sabotage me.
Yeah. So the question then becomes, well, how do you get access to your own property? And in this particular case, you would file a Form J, which is essentially a dispute resolution form. You want the end of tenancy for all, unusual or a situation that doesn't fall within one of the standard forms, and you would have to go there and have a hearing and present your case. So specific to Hannah's case, I would still have the lawyer fill out the affidavit saying, yes, we are going to own or occupy this unit. I would get the vacant unit occupied right away so that you can explain at the hearing why you cannot just simply occupy the vacant unit. And then I would get some sort of confirmation that the seller refused to provide to serve the tenant with the Form DR2, because then you can say, listen, I as the purchaser of this property did everything right. I've got my affidavit saying I'm moving in there. The other unit is occupied. I want to move into that particular unit. And here's proof that I tried to get the seller to do it and they wouldn't do it. I think then you've got a really good case to take to the tenancy board. But you have to serve the tenant with the Form J. You have to wait for hearing. You've got to go down that rabbit hole. It's not going to be fun.
I've had this happen. There's two other things they mentioned here as well. Potentially talking about cutting a deal. I would always suggest this. It's worth cutting a deal.
Yeah.
Because the headache and time for both you and the tenant is no fun. Like it's a big drawn out process. There's hearings. Those are stressful in themselves. You're trying to put together all these documents and like whatever everyone says, and it creates a lot of dispute. So I usually would suggest just going to a tenant and offering them a lump sum of cash and like a decent amount. Like don't be like $500.
Yeah,
$2,000,
anyway.
$2,500, like something that makes it worthwhile, or a system saying, "Hey, look, I found a unit very similar to what you have. It's a little bit more pricey. I'm going to give you this much money. I'll offset the cost for the first year, whatever it may be." But I've had clients go through this process, and they've gotten it like let's say won their dispute or won their claim, but instead of it being like a 60 or 90 days notice, they were allowed to give 12 months notice.
Whew.
Which can be tough, and it was because they were buying to actually move in. And they then had to wait 12 months. So they actually had to go find something for another year before they could move into the space. And so it's tough. And right now, especially the tenancy board they're there for both, I guess, tenants and landlords, but the sentiment towards landlords is quite low. And so they likely will side with the tenant.
That said, the tenancy board does want to be fair and does proceed rationally. So if you can prove a rational case as to what you did and how you tried to act in good faith and follow the rules, i.e. you have that affidavit. Yeah. You asked the seller to serve the Form DR2. They just flat refused. You need to be able to prove all of that.
Yeah,
right?
Because then you could say arguably the Form DR2 still applies
because we tried to do it as part of this purchase. So the spirit of the rule of the tenancy board is there. It just happened that the seller refused to do it, and that's kind of beyond your control.
Yeah.
The challenge in this particular case is they're going to say, well, why didn't you just move into the vacant one? So you have to have a legitimate reason that, you know, you wanted to rent that one at full market because financially that's what you needed to offset your mortgage or what have you. You have to have all those ducks in a row and have a
It helps your
logical
case.
Yeah.
It's still an opinion-based system. Which makes it unfortunate.
But I think also being proactive, I'm always very direct with tenants. I explain to them the situation, and you may be surprised that they will say, yeah, I understand it. It is at the end of the day your house, and we'd love to work with you and get it in writing, obviously, when they agree to something. But some people will understand that, you know, they might have to move out as part of this process.
Yep. Next question. Brock, I got to read this.
Yeah.
He says, I've been watching your podcast religiously over the past week. Thanks, Brock. I hope that everyone's doing the same.
Yeah, love it.
But he's wondering if someone has a bad debt to income ratio. So that's basically they're calculating how much debt you're carrying relative to how much money you make. And there's different ways that they look at it and sometimes how they include rents. Should I be worried about my refinance? Is there any way to looking into this before buying the building or the multi-unit? And I'm saying this because my refinance might be larger than my pre-approval. This is something that you do need to be kind of concerned about, because if you can't cover the amount of money that you're borrowing, there is a chance on a residential side that they won't necessarily extend it to that point. They are, I find, more willing to go over a little bit with like a line of credit and things like that over what your pre-approval amount was going to be. But in a multi-unit case, more likely than not, what's going to happen is you're going to go to commercial financing and they'll lend you 75% based on the rental income. That's what happens with multi-unit refinances, is they're basing it on the rental income and no longer your personal
Over
income.
5 units, right? I don't know if he's talking about a duplex though.
You can do it. You can do less than 5 units. I've done a 3-unit at 75%.
With commercial, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah,
75% loan, and they did it based on income approach.
Right.
So, and that's what I did when I got started, because one of the first places I had was a triplex,
You had
and
that
it
same
was
issue?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I didn't really have the income to suffice it, and so to do that, we had to go income approach. The appraisal was done on income approach, and the refinance was also done on income approach, and it reduced the amount that I get. Like again, I went from 80 to 75, and I had to go with a non-grade A lender. I had to go with like a B lender. So instead of paying what would have been like 1.8% at the time, I probably was paying about 3.
Which also sometimes can hurt the servicing. But what you're saying is when you go with commercial financing, they look at the building and the asset and the cash flow.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go residential, they look at you as the borrower.
Yeah.
Brock, if you go back and you check out our episode on like burring places, we get into this a little bit.
Burring.
But yes, you should be able to prepare for this in advance, because if you're working with a really good mortgage broker, they're going to say, what are you trying to do with this property? Okay, you're going to fix it up and you want to refinance it. Well, then right away, they're putting you in a different product, probably a variable mortgage, right? They're
100%,
right?
variable open, because you don't want the fees.
You should already have had this conversation. And then they're going to say, listen, you can make that place beautiful, but if you take it from 350 to 500, I can't get you a mortgage at 500.
Yeah.
They should know that in advance. And even if the rents are really good and they add that to your income, it may not move the needle enough. So this is why you need to have a really good relationship with your broker and talk about these things up front.
They can't give you the specifics for numbers, but they'll be able to give you the suggestions and rough ideas so you know what you're working with.
Yeah. So you need to kind of lay that plan out. I talk about this exit strategy. What is your exit strategy to get out of this property?
Yeah.
And then as Neal was saying, if you change it to a commercial loan, looking at just the cash flow of the property, you're going to eat it on rate, but then they'll care less about your personal debt service ratio. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah. Try not to be too rate sensitive when investing.
Yeah,
to an extent, it will really hinder your ability to grow.
I know I had somebody like, I can't believe if I go this way, I've got to pay 3.5%. It's like, man, any time before 3 years ago, if you got a rate at 3.5%, you're happy.
Yeah, I remember signing at 3.3, being like, holy, free money.
Yeah, free money. Mitchy Doo-Doo.
Mitchy Doo-Doo.
I answered this question online too. Again, comment in there for questions. Do you guys ever use credit unions for mortgages? Pros, cons. Our last mortgage we pitted, broker against the bank that we had a good history with, and the bank got us a decent cash signing bonus and better terms. And never considered this previously. First thing is, yes, I've used credit unions. I think they're great because they do a lot of alternative properties in alternative areas. There's some lenders who don't touch commercial under $1 million. Right? There's some lenders that just say, no, under $1 million loan, we have no interest in it. Credit union, they absolutely have an appetite for
way more flexible.
Yeah. And if you want to buy something in a kind of a bit more rural, there's some major lenders who are like, we're not going to loan you $600,000 on a commercial plaza in the middle of nowhere. Credit union will.
Renovation loans, conventional lenders might do 10% of purchase price. a credit union, I will do 100% of purchase price. If you have an appraisal to support it,
Yeah.
they will give you a massive construction loan with proper draw setups and everything on a personal house.
Yeah, so I've used them for like a vacant commercial property, for a mechanic shop. Again, things that were maybe a little bit less desirable to more traditional lenders.
Even environmental concerns.
Yeah,
You can purchase with an environmental concern as long as you may have a remediation plan or a cost to do so. It's something that they can blend in. A regular bank will not touch that, or they'll get you to put down an absurd amount to cover their ass. So yeah, I'm huge, and both of us have used credit unions a bunch. This idea of pitting them against is interesting. I'm big on pitting people against each other in the sense of like when I'm buying a car, I'll usually call two dealers and be like, "Hey, I'm buying this car," and put the two phones together and let them battle it down to the zero. But I don't know. In this situation, I struggle because I say you want to build a relationship with your broker, and so it's almost like a spit in the face to do such a thing. I feel like, but I can also respect it in some level of like you're trying to get the best deal. But I don't know if I necessarily would do that. I think usually the broker is already incentivized enough because they only get paid by putting through the deal that they're going to grind as hard as they can. And realistically, you're looking to build, like if you want to do more than one property, you're looking to build a forward relationship with your broker, and building that will be more valuable than the $1,000 cash signing bonus that you're going to get on the purchase.
Well, one of the questions in here was also any cons to going with the credit union. They can sometimes be a little bit slower. Their rates can be a little bit higher.
I'd say they find them a little faster.
Oh, really?
I've had them fund in like a week.
Funding I found was quick. Approval I found was slow.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So there might be some cons there, and this whole pitting against. I feel a couple ways about that. One, for me, it's all about service, and if someone has given me better service, I wouldn't necessarily throw them by the wayside because someone else gave me a cash bonus. The better terms is interesting for sure because I think, you want to be responsible and get the best terms possible. That said, I'm looking at this scenario and saying, all right, you had an independent broker and you pitted them against the bank and you ended up going with the bank. And that's great. They had a great product for you, great terms. They even gave you a little bit of cash. Say you want to do something later the next year.
Banks can say no,
And the bank says no.
which is likely.
It's quite possible.
Yeah.
Now you have to go back to that broker. And so whatever cash that was, I mean, if someone offered me $10,000 and decent mortgage terms on something, I still wouldn't throw out my broker because that's a lifelong relationship.
That's a partnership.
Right? That started with one duplex with zero money down to like what I'm doing now.
That started with beatboxing, didn't it?
You're thinking of breakdancing, but that's adorable. So I don't know. I feel differently about that. I love the aggressive spirit. And maybe it leads to a great relationship with that bank where you can do a lot of things. But what if the next product you need to go through a credit union and your broker needs to make the deal happen for you through a credit union?
He's going to pit you against his broker fee.
Yeah. Those things have a funny way of coming back around.
I would say to end that would just be I'd feel more comfortable pitting two grade A banks against each other. I'd go to CIBC and I'd go to TD. Those mortgage advisors don't get a direct cut from that. It's a little unfortunate to run them against each other as well, but I'd feel less bad about doing that because to be honest with you, in a year or two when you go back, the person at CIBC that gave you the mortgage probably is in a different position and you're going to have someone totally different doing your mortgage there.
Yeah, but it is a good point because I know that someone commented on one of our posts about mortgage brokers and implied that going direct to your bank can actually be better in some cases. Certainly rate-wise, there are instances where it'll have advantages.
We're not finance professionals, so don't take our advice.
Well, I'm just saying, different cases, different scenarios.
The next
read Amanda's
one.
question there, yeah.
Amanda, I feel like you're calling me out. Can you explain private construction loans a little bit? I am beginning to look at building a duplex on land that will be gifted to me, but was told by my mortgage broker that construction loans are only given out by banks. A couple errors. I don't know who told you that, but private construction loans, I'll start with that. Private construction loans are available in a ton of different ways, but really everything with private money or even any regular loan from a grade B like COA or credit union is based on your appraisal values. So you need to have some sort of show that there is going to be value at the end of this thing, and then they'll lend against that. So for example, you're going to get this land gifted to you. So I guess you'll owe nothing on it. You'll have nothing into it. So there's already equity there. You can say the land's worth, let's say, $100,000. And now you want to build a duplex that's going to be worth $700,000. So you say, okay, go to the bank. I have a duplex that's going to be worth $700,000. Depending on what bank you go to, they're going to be willing to give you a percentage of that to build it. So they're going to say, what do you owe now? You're going to say, I owe $0. And they say, okay, we'll give you 70% of the $700,000. will give you $490,000 in the course of draws to build that. Where private loans become more valuable is they might go to a higher percentage ratio, and they may also negate the fact of you having to put in cash. Most banks, even with the appraisal and even knowing that there's a ton of equity on the table, may expect or want to see you put in 25%, and they'll usually want to see you put it in first. So if it's a $500,000 build, even though you're going to have $200,000 of equity when it's done, and you already technically own the land, so you have $100,000 of equity there, they may still want to see you put in 25% on that construction on the loan to cost. They're getting better now, and they're starting to take into account the land value as part of your equity.
Yeah.
But it all depends. Like if you're brand new and you go into a grade A bank, they may totally forget about the fact about the land. They might say, you don't really have a history. We still want to see you get this to like framed up before we start putting money into this thing.
Yeah, I think that you got a simple answer, Amanda, for what's a really more complicated question. Not from us, but from that broker saying, oh, it's not possible, you can't do it that way. I think there is a way to do it. I think you're probably running up against some obstacles of them saying, well, if this is your first endeavor, maybe you're not the person we want to loan this money to in this capacity.
Yeah.
Certainly a private lender could do this, and they might be the right fit because you just sell them on the idea of the package, which would involve things like Neal mentioned, getting the land appraised as is and trying to juice that land appraisal through the roof because that is your equity, getting an appraisal of the as complete of the building, and hopefully that turns out really, really good, and then get your cost of construction. So then when you go to this private lender, you can say, look at the equity I already have, look at what the end value is going to be. I'm effectively asking you for this, but you can see the light at the end of the rainbow, and bring on a builder that's reputable enough that they can really cost that thing out, do some renderings, and put this great package together. You're going to eat it on the rate, but you're going to get it done with less cash out of pocket.
I would say less cash out of pocket. The other things you can save on with privates is like with a regular bank, they might want to see a cost consultant involved.
Yeah.
So that can cost, because it's okay, $2,000 for the initial report and $1,000 each time you want to draw. 6 draws. Okay, now you just spent $8,000. When you factor it into your interest rate, that might actually bump your interest rate up by 2-3 points. Additionally, the time value of putting in the cost consulting, so you got to do all the work to have everything lined out for them. They're going to have a ton of questions. They're going to want to do a bunch of site visits, and it might take 2 weeks every time for you to get money. Privates might be like, yeah, we're all good. A private may even just send somebody from their office to go look at your build and give you a check mark. No cost to you. It's already factored in, and they'll release the money the next day. And that's some of the experience that I've had where literally it got to the point where we had a relationship. I could take phone pictures, send it to them. Within 3 hours, cash was in my account. On the same note, I've done with better banks at way lower interest rates. Cost consultant had to come out, an appraiser had to come out. It took 2.5 weeks. They didn't feel that I had hit exactly. They shaved it down by 3%. I didn't get quite as much money, plus a holdback, and it was just such a pain in the butt that realistically I was like, you know what? I'll pay the extra few percentage points because I don't have to pay any of the extra costs, and the money just turns over quick, which sometimes is really important when you're being squeezed by a contractor and you don't have an alternative option to get the money.
Yeah.
So
you could also look at bringing in the contractor, and depending on who the contractor was, they may be able to do some financing in-house or make arrangements whereby if they get some sort of temporary first position on the land, that they could build it and effectively sell it to you as a turnkey at the end. Like, I think you could do something creative there.
Yeah.
So just continue to plug away at that, because I do think there is something there.
Yeah.
Adam, man, these questions are taking a little while, but we're doing good here. I think this is interesting stuff. So these are good questions.
Yeah.
Adam says he's in Toronto with tenants below market rent and capped increases. How can I increase the rents to increase my valuation and unlock his equity? Full disclosure, we don't operate in Ontario, so we don't know the nuance of that. But you're
dug into it a bit.
Yeah, we dug into it a bit, and you do really have a challenge on your hands there, as Neal can kind of elaborate on.
Yeah, so when we dug into it a bit, we found that it's even more difficult there than we thought it is for us. And that is, you can give 120 days written notice in Ontario for renovation, but you have to, even if you renovate the unit, you have to provide that tenant the ability to move back into your unit at the same rate that it was at.
Yeah.
So,
and
if you don't, you have to pay them for the time that they were out. And you have to, even when you're doing renovation, I believe you have to cover the cost for them to be out of the unit during that time to a maximum of 90 days, but still you have to cover some allocation there.
Yeah, a to be determined inconvenience fee.
Yeah. So
then they can get to move back in.
And then they get to move back in at the previous rate, not at an increased rate, at the previous rate. That would be so difficult. I don't even know what you would do. Like, that is, you're basically hooped. as far as I can understand, it's very tough for you to be able to get your valuation up. The best thing I think you can do is always adding units. It looks like developing makes the most sense in these scenarios.
Yeah. I mean, a couple little tricks I would try there, Adam, is moving forward, look at the nuance of your tenancy regulations. And when you get a vacancy, one, swing for the fences on rent, but two, break out things like laundry, storage lockers, utilities, parking, all of these things that can then be independent of your base rent. So even if your base rent is only going up by 2%, maybe your parking's going up by 10%.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe storage is going up by 10% to try to stay above water. And certain people listening to this, well, the people who think that that's terrible aren't listening to this show anyway, but this is what you need to do to kind of protect yourself in some of these instances.
This is also where you need to be making serious offers to your tenants to buy them out.
This is the other thing I was going to say. I would sit down with my broker and sit down with appraiser and say, okay, I've got these 12 units here and my rents are, call it $1,000. What is my change in valuation and what is my access to equity if I can get those rents up to $1,400?
Yeah.
And quick math, that's $4,800 a month times 12 months. You're roughly $60,000 a year times a 20 times multiplier. It's a significant amount of money, 1.2 million, give or take.
Yep.
Right. And if you can access even 75% of that, it's a significant amount of money.
Yep.
That tells me you got a lot of money to pay these people out. And I would start going hyper aggressive on offering these people money to leave.
Yeah. And actually, this isn't just on a side note. I remember seeing a story a few months ago. A set of tenants in San Francisco got $750K USD, so $1 million Canadian, to move from their unit. Soon,
Wow.
the new equity play is not going to be buying the real estate. It's going to be
sitting there,
signing leases as cheap as you can, and then reselling it back to the landlord.
You think that's crazy, but this would be the world that some people would aspire to. That like the tenants get so much control that's how they get protect, and that's how they get a piece of the real estate market is through those sort of rights.
Yeah,
and selling.
I wonder if rental arbitrage would make sense. Like if you can go out and rent a bunch of units at $1,000 a month. Then you release them at $1,200 a month.
Goes on.
You get
already.
to carry the one at $1,000 a month. So then you have the landlord by the gonads, and you're also making cash flow on top of that.
Yeah, that happens all the time. For sure. Crazy situation.
Last one here. What do we got? Laird. How can I convince someone exiting the business, we're assuming real estate, to do a vendor take back with me? What are the benefits of the arrangement, and also how does it affect my debt servicing from a lender's perspective?
Love this question.
Yeah. So. Convincing someone, I mean, there's a lot of nuances to that. I think it really depends on who the person that you're dealing with is. But I think making sure that they understand the benefits to both parties, that's the biggest thing. You got to bring all the benefits and how it's going to help make the deal cross the finish line, and additionally how it can help them maybe save on some taxes, reduce and give them a cash flow, however it's structured, kind of what it's going to do. Maybe give them some return on the money. You throw an interest rate against the vendor take back. Mm-hmm. So you were going to take this money and go invest it. I'm going to give you 6% anyway. So you're already going to be making money on your money. Mm-hmm. You're going to get a monthly payment every month. You're not going to have such a big tax bill today, on and on and on, all these things. So I think that's how you do it. And obviously understanding your audience.
You have to understand right off the bat if they have equity in the property. It's not a given that they have equity to hold back for you. If the property is $1 million and they owe $750, they don't have any equity to hold for you. So you have to understand that. The other thing you have to understand is how much they're making a month on the property, and then what the possible tax ramifications are going to be from them. And you get that information, frankly, by asking. Yeah. And you build that rapport. You ask them those questions. Then they will be inclined to do a vendor take back if they want to kick some of their tax implications down the road, if they want to continue to have stream of income from the property by way of you paying them interest only payments for a period of a couple of years. And they may just want to do it for you because if you build up that rapport, they like you, you like them.
If you didn't pit them against their broker, then they might be inclined to do this for you.
Sometimes, being nice goes a long way. But it does have real benefits in the form of deferred taxes, continued cash flow, getting the deal done, and I guess those are the big ones.
Getting to say VTB all the time and sounding cool.
Yeah. There's all kinds of benefits.
Yeah, so those are the benefits.
We're going to do a whole course on that, actually. We're still building out the website, but there's going to be a lot of that in there.
We're going to do a detailed one. Like this question here, I think we'd like to answer more so in the course, but it's how does it affect my debt servicing from a lender's perspective?
Right.
there's a million and one ways to look at this because it depends how you register that loan.
Yep.
You can register that loan in a bunch of different ways. You might be able to put it as a second behind a different loan on a different property.
Exactly. Might not even need to be on that property.
Exactly. So it might not actually impact you on that front. And additionally, likely it's not going to be a credit-based, credit registered person that's going to be going against it. So realistically,
Could be a promissory note.
It could be a promissory note. And so the banks aren't necessarily going to see it when they do it. So there's a lot of options there. I think we're going to leave that one there because I think we want to do a specific course on VTBs. So look for that, and we'll go into all the nuances and kind of the tricks of the trade to be able to get them in place and continue to get good financing.
I have one other question that someone asked me because a lot of people looking at the crazy market and how hard it is to secure properties and bidding wars and blah, blah. And some people want all the bids to be transparent so that you can see, oh, that person bid 500 grand. I'm going to bid 501 grand. And the next person go 502 and have this, which isn't logistically realistic, at least until we move everything online. They asked me if you could reinvent the system, what would be your crazy idea of how to do it? And this was my crazy idea, that you are not allowed to sell the property for more than 5% over your asking price or less than 5% under your asking price. And as a result, you have to be very, very specific with your asking price. So if you list that property at $500,000, the most you're allowed to take is $525,000, and the least you're allowed to take is $475,000. And this would allow everyone to understand what the property is going to trade for, and would get people away from this thing of just price it so damn low and just run it up and blah, blah, blah. If we were starting, that'll never happen in a million years. I'm just saying.
I'll tell you why I don't like it right off the hop.
Oh, I love it. Let's hear it.
Okay. It limits your upside, but you have limitless downside. I know you're saying you can't go 5% below your asking price, but if it doesn't sell, at some point you're going to have to lower the price.
Correct. You'd also be more likely to start your price higher and slowly bring it down.
Yeah.
I'm saying if you wanted to return balance and predictability and fairness to a crazy market, this is what you'd need to do. And you know,
you sound like a buyer, not a seller, Chandler.
I'm just saying this is a hypothetical. Someone asked me what I would do, and
I do like that in general because it adds a lot more control over it, and I think
also means you need to price correctly.
You need to price correctly. I feel like this might be an internal anger that you have towards some of the listings out there today.
No, not at all. Like,
just kidding.
But it just would be better. And then also you can imagine, then you get all these offers, and you're actually deciding on the offer based on more than just price.
They're all going to go unconditional at that point.
You're likely getting unconditional offers. Some of these letters that people write actually might have some weight.
It actually will go down to letters, yeah.
You know, like this would be...
So we have 14 offers at 525 because we listed at 500, and they're all unconditional. We have some letters here, so now I'm judging these people based on their ESG score.
But also...
If you've been following the podcast,
now I hate the system.
You know that Chandler's about to go off.
Yeah, not an ESG fan. Okay, so in our last episode, we talked a lot about buying land for everything, you know, just wanting to hold it and how much money you're going to have to put down. If you get a piece of dirt in the middle of nowhere that's beautiful, realizing the costs associated with servicing with power, cutting a driveway, clearing the lot, preparing a pad for a home, getting your well, getting your septic, all of those things. Then we talked a little bit about the importance of, we talked today about the importance of getting a planner involved and maybe a site person involved when you're looking at what you can do on a lot, regardless if that's a small scale or multi-scale building. Today we're going to talk a little bit about pricing, I think.
Yeah, we are.
Construction.
You can skip all these steps too. Like I was just sitting here and I do it, and I was like, man, that's overwhelming. You can skip all of these steps if you just hire a builder. Effectively.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's talk about cost to build, because I know a lot of people are looking at doing it themselves because it is expensive to hire a builder. It's expensive to build in general, and it's very expensive to hire a builder.
Any builders want to come talk your talk on here, let us know.
We would, yeah, exactly. We'd love to have on some builders that could tell us about their business, kind of what they offer, some of the packages they can do, and what they can do for a client. Because I know I have a lot of people that ask me about it, especially now.
Yeah, we're going to have the guys from Lindsay here on at some point, but also I'd be curious to see a residential
home builder would be nice.
Yeah.
So off the hop, we're going to start with single families. I think a lot of people are asking about building single families. Again, it's more relevant now just purely based on the fact that there's no inventory. And a lot of people feel like, if I'm going to spend $700 grand on a house, maybe I want to customize it a little bit and kind of make it my own or pick where it goes versus being stuck in a certain subdivision and set to a certain plan. Because most subdivisions now have 4 or 5 plans that you can pick from, and that's it. So it might not fit what you're looking for.
And one color.
And
one color for the walls.
One shade.
Yeah.
This gives you that opportunity to do so. We brought the Altus Building Guide, and Altus Building Guide is something that comes out every year. They do their research through a ton of, I guess, pulling a bunch of data and giving rough numbers, and they're kind of funny because for markets that are a little smaller, the numbers can skew if there was 2 or 3 giant mansions that were built. But taking a look at wood-framed residential single-family home in Halifax is what we're going to use because that's where we are. They put the pricing between $100 to $155 a square foot. That, unfortunately, due to the pace that this market is transitioning at,
That's out of date.
is impossible.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago, you could build for about $100 a square foot on the cheapest single-story, like bungalow-style finishes, and you'd have to be very involved, not hiring a builder. You'd have to be literally out there framing on the stuff yourself, hanging board yourself. Like that would be the only way to get it done.
This is also going to be without HST, and this is also going to be through the construction industry, which you are going to pay these builders a 10% markup on the cost, and then there's going to be HST. I know there's rebates and all that stuff, but yeah.
The cheapest that I have heard in the last probably 6-8 months is $185 a square foot.
Man, I haven't even heard that. But
And that's cheap. To now build like a single family home that they're called custom, even though you don't think, like, you think in your head custom and you think some crazy compound with like glass, everything, and elevators and all this stuff. That's custom, but there's like to build your own house is
custom is you get to choose what floor. You
Yeah.
you get a choice of 5 floors.
The second you move one wall for a bedroom, you're into a custom house.
Yeah.
And so I would expect to see somewhere more in the wheelhouse of like $250 a square
250,
foot.
100%.
$250 a square
Yeah.
foot, and if you get into high end finishes, $325 a square foot,
Yeah.
easily. And if you want to go to that crazy elevator glass stuff, sky's the limit.
Yeah.
But that was what you should be budgeting, and that's plus HST plus land.
Yeah.
And there's good chance for cost overruns.
This is why everyone is like, oh, I'm going to be savvy here. I'm going to get a little piece of land. I'm just going to put a small house. Don't worry about Chandler. It's just going to be a small 1,200 square foot home. It's like, man, that home you're talking about is about 300 grand to build.
Yeah.
The land's going to be, even if the land's 50,000, we already talked about why there's 40 extra grand there. So, you're 350 plus 9, you're $440,000 to build that new
1,200 square foot
12
home
on like a slab.
Yeah, and this is sometimes where you end up going back to buying these pre-made builder homes because they're able to get that number down because they are building the same product 100 times, and so they're able to order everything times 100,
Yep.
and they're bringing everything down marginally, and they have crazy speeds of getting them up. And so you're going to say, how is this possible? Because I looked at a house on brand new on whatever street for 500. And it's 2,000 square feet. By your building metrics, they wouldn't have even be able to build it.
They
they're
also
getting the lots at a discount.
The lots. Yeah.
Lots are at a huge discount. They have some write-offs, and additionally, they're building for way less because, again, they're using huge economies of scale to buy everything that they have.
There's also a misconception that these builders are making a lot of money on these houses, and they've certainly done well the last couple of years because they did these en masse factory builders were able to get some material pricing locked in and then rode a wave where over the course of the 6 to 12 month construction period, the market happened to go up 20%. So they took a 5% margin on their home build and ended up with a 25% margin on it. So they certainly crushed it there. But historically speaking, there has not been a big margin on new construction homes.
No.
They were working very hard to make what I think is a fair amount of money. Like relative, I wouldn't do it. Like it's so difficult, right? Like if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And the only way they can do it is because of the volume.
It's exactly. They're making the money on the volume. The other thing to consider is some of them actually didn't make any money in the last couple of years because they did the reverse where they pre-sold, because it's nice to have it pre-sold so you know what the price on the house is and you know that you got someone at the end to buy it. But they pre-sold at 400 grand. Material costs spiked, labor costs spiked. In the 12 months it took them to build it, they actually spent over the 400 grand, and now someone else got it, and the house is now also probably worth $650,000.
Yeah.
So there was actually a lot of builders that didn't necessarily lose their shirt, but they lost a lot of money on the product that they had.
I've heard of builders going to a buyer and saying, "Hey, we'll give you $50,000 to buy the home back to you." To
I have one going right now.
Yeah.
That exact amount.
Yeah.
But the
50
thing
grand
is,
to
it's
not-
probably worth about 150 more. But the builder's also threatening not to build the house, and we're actually past due date. We wrote this contract about 14 months ago.
That's messy.
And the house is framed, and that's it.
That is messy. That's going to
courts.
Coming to a court near you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've seen a couple others like that where there have been building delays and then arguments over deposits and lost value because, as a buyer, you feel entitled to that appreciation that you would have gotten, and now the deal gets pulled out from you. Not only do you want your time, but you want the lost opportunity cost value.
I think you are entitled to that appreciation because if the
contract
market had gone sideways or even down a little bit, that builder would be coming after you for that closing price.
I've gotten that question from every buyer who has built. They said, well, what if the price of wood comes down? Do we get it for less?
Yeah.
It's like, no, you do not.
No chance. That's
Yeah.
so. I think they have the full right to do it. You signed a contract in good faith. You put a deposit to buy it at that purchase price. There's no reason that they should be able to not deliver on that. And I mean, I say that from a place where obviously I'm not being necessarily losing money on building homes.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the risk that you take in that game. The other thing to consider with this is like you're like, oh, man, those prices seem insane. A modular home, which is like 1,000 square feet, is like 200 grand now. To buy a pre-made mobile home, like a trailer home that you think of, those are
Kent Homes, Maple Leaf. Yeah.
a couple $100,000. And that was the other thing I was going to say before. For a little period of time there, modulars were starting to make a lot of sense because the home is built all indoors. So everything's perfectly straight, lined up, super clean and tidy. You put your foundation in the ground, it's quick, and then they roll it out and then drop it in place and you hook it up. And modular homes are not what people think. A lot of people, I think they look like trailers.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. There's houses out in brand new subdivisions that are modular homes. Like they can do 2-story houses with a garage, and that's a modular.
Yeah.
It comes out in 2 or 4 sections, and they literally put the sections together, and they'll put the drywall seams, tape up the drywall seams, hook up all the electrical, hook up all the plumbing, and it looks like a normal house.
There was actually a company, I think in Toronto or Montreal, that as a publicity stunt, they built a 4-unit apartment building in 2 weeks because it was all modular. So they prepped the site and they dropped it off and they had it connected in 2 weeks.
That's neat.
It's very cool. It's amazing technology. I think probably it is the future, but realize their tile is still costing the same. Their fixtures are still costing the same. So they're eating all those delays.
Yeah.
They're eating all those price increases. So the advantage is now speed only. It's not, and even the speed has kind of dropped off because they got a lot of big federal contracts for Indigenous communities, affordable housing. It's a challenge right now. But historically, I mean, everything's all about recency bias because back in the day, you could not give these new construction homes away, and a lot of builders went under. So there's ebbs and flows for all this.
Yeah. We were going to touch on financing. We talked about that a lot last time. We also have subdividing land on here. I think that's something that we touched on a little bit last time. Just talking about like making sure you have corner lots, you have the frontage that you need, understanding your zoning, this so we can get a planner involved. That is a great way sometimes if you can buy a piece of land that you can cut off a chunk and sell it. It might give you the cash to get you started on your house or just give you some extra pocket change.
Frontage.
Frontage is so key.
Frontage and what are the neighboring property uses?
Yeah.
Those are everything. If you've got the biggest acreage ever, but only 30 feet of frontage, you are in for ahead of. You've got very limited things that you can do. If you've got a small parcel or you've got a good frontage, but it's not too deep and everything in the back of you is established residential, your setbacks are going to be such that you could be a lot more limited than you think.
Yeah.
Right. So those are, reasons again to consult a planning person who's going to be able to go through the bylaws, look at the lot, and really start giving some valuable information there.
Before we move on to multi-unit, I'm just looking through the residential pricing. So for custom, I think the custom built single family homes is what actually makes more sense. For Halifax, they have 260 to 520, which I think actually, so if you say on the bottom end, 260 is what it's going to cost you to build a normal house.
Oh, yeah.
And 520 I can see being for custom home. Looking through some of these numbers, to build a custom home, the high end in Vancouver is $11.35 a square foot. $11.35 a square foot. So that means you're building 1,000 square foot house for $1.1 million. Now, obviously, super high end finishes, but that is insanity.
That's crazy.
And on the low end, their lowest is 450. So they're saying you're building 1,000 square foot house for 500 grand.
That makes sense. That 155 before HST and before markup for the single families, also with an unfinished basement. Because the other thing about square footage is the first 1,000 is the most expensive.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you build a 1-level house and you put engineered roof trusses on it, if you had made a 2-level house, you're still getting the same roof.
Yeah.
And if you put a slab or a foundation and put 1 story on it or 3 stories on it, the foundation still costs the same. So the first 1,000 square feet are some of the most expensive. Yep. It's like when people look at this and say, oh, well, I should be able to do a renovation then at, a certain amount per square foot. Not if you're doing just your kitchen and your ensuite bath. Like those are the 2 most expensive per foot things you can do. So, a lot of these numbers would be based off effectively a 2,500 square foot contractor built standard quality home. And that's where that 250 that we're seeing 260 down there makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of crazy. The other thing I'm noticing is Halifax on this list actually has the lowest cost out of any of these cities. And we have Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, GTA, Ottawa, Montreal, and St. John's on there as well. And
we're about the same as St. John's.
They're still showing as being higher here. So I think this might be a little bit skewed. And I think St. John's probably shows a bit more accurate number to what we would actually be spending. I'm surprised though to see that Montreal is not that much more expensive, but it is more expensive, but their actual real estate's cheaper. Like in practice, the real estate's cheaper, but their build costs are higher.
What do we got here for multi-unit? What are they saying?
So multi-unit, if you go down here, it depends what we're looking at, but actually, sorry, it's on the top. Condominiums and apartments, they have it actually pegged up by about 70%. So they have it $170 to $240 a square foot. That seems also a little low.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? I mean, you're in the midst of one right now.
Man, let me think. Well, so much of this varies on parking because there's big expenses with parking and there's soft costs and your land costs. You're probably, oh man, yeah, more than that, more than that.
You were talking. Yours is a 6 stories with 2 underground.
Yeah.
Okay, so 6 stories, 2 underground parking lot.
I can't remember my overall square footage though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember we talked about it a bit. I believe before parking, it was around $170 to $180 a square foot.
Yeah.
Plus HST above ground.
Yeah. For some reason, I feel like it ends up being, as crazy as it sounds, like around 270 a square foot, something like that.
Yeah. And I've heard that as well. And sometimes maybe in your head you're thinking, oh, that's not too bad because if the average unit's 700 square feet, then I'm spending around $200,000 to build it. But you're forgetting all the common areas, the parking,
which is about 20 to 25% of the building.
Yes, exactly.
But if you count parking, it's about 40% of the building.
Exactly. So you have to add that on to everything. And this is, again, where my obsession with looking now is buying buildings that have enough land that I can do exterior parking, keep them low rise, keep them wood. Now, again, factoring in that Chandler's is concrete. I just did a wood construction one that Lindsay's priced for me, and it came in around the low 200s. It was around $235 a square foot, and that was around 112 or 120,000 square feet. So we're getting economies of scale there, and it's coming down to around 235 to 250 square foot still. And that's wood frame, normal finishes, 2-bedroom units, nothing crazy, no big 3-bedroom penthouses and all these fancy finishes, nothing like that. Just standard finish. So I think realistically for like a turnkey product nowadays and a concrete build, you're looking at $300 a square foot. Yeah.
Which if you're thinking of doing something smaller, like I think it was Hannah who asked about doing a duplex there, she's going to be around the $250 a square foot price point. If she contracts out herself, maybe does a little bit better, but probably best to leave that to a GC. It's going to be about $250 a square foot.
Yeah. The difference we have on here is we're talking a little bit about the difference is wood, concrete, and hybrid. To make it clear, so obviously wood construction, the building is stick framed out of wood. Concrete, the building is made from formed concrete. Hybrid, there's kind of couple different options. A lot of times you'll see a concrete first floor, like a concrete podium, followed by up to 5 stories of wood. Or there is what's called, I forget what it's called actually. Yeah, it's called overpour basically, like that, where they put the slabs in between. So your floor surface is made from concrete, but the rest is either wood or metal framing or a combination of the two. And those seem to be becoming a lot more common nowadays.
Yeah.
There's a lot of distaste, I think, for wood just for sound travel, water penetration, flooding, issues like that. And then concrete, people love concrete, but on the flip side, it's quite expensive to build. So these hybrid models are getting to be quite popular because they can help save some costs. Also, why you see the concrete podiums a lot is just for commercial spaces.
Yeah, you need the fire separations.
You need the fire separations and the noise separations. Like if you have a restaurant below an apartment, you need a fair bit of, like you said, fire separation and noise because otherwise it's going to be nuts. It's going to be smells. But I think the one thing I see a lot with the concrete that makes it really nice, being in the restoration industry, when one unit floods, only that unit floods, or maybe a little bit will seep into another unit. Yeah. Wood, like we have a few buildings that like a pipe will go in a wood unit and it'll hit 8 more or 20 more units. Yeah. Like it's an explosion and it rips through the whole building and it sprinkles everywhere.
That's why one of the things, if you're out there shopping for condos, something to consider is whether it's a wood construction condo or a concrete construction condo. I think that's probably all the time we have today. Is there anything else on our list here that we need to go through?
No, we touched on that. I think we were a little bit quick on the multi-unit stuff. We'll talk about more. Again, same thing. We're trying to build some videos for our website where we go really in depth to break down all of the costs, the differences, the benefits. And then also, again, talking about maybe some of the new CMHC stuff with the Flex program, 95% loans. And then as we go on through our builds, we'll have more and more in-depth information about the costing that we're experiencing.
Yeah, excited for it. And thanks so much for the questions because I think this generated some great discussion here, things that maybe we hadn't thought about mentioning. So please continue to comment, put that stuff out there. We'll respond a little bit on the post, but we'll also try to get into it on the episode. Listen, all right, we're going to sign off today, but we want to also give a shout out to Blue Nose Home Inspections. They're our sponsor. They came on board. We're super excited to have them. And something a lot of people have been asking, we covered this a bit during the home inspection or the home buying process, is what's the role of a home inspector in this market where a lot of people are waiving home inspections? A couple things that are kind of cool out there. If you're a seller, you might consider getting your home pre-inspected. So when you put your home on the market, you already have this inspection report that you can provide buyers. And if they want to take it, then it increases the likelihood that they may waive conditions in their offer on your home. So as a seller, you may actually be considering to get a home inspection from Blue Nose Inspections. Another situation is, yes, you've waived your home inspection, but once you move into the home, it's still a good idea to have an inspector through and give you a little bit of a rundown of how the property operates, how it works, things you might want to put in your home maintenance schedule. So Blue Nose, you don't have to necessarily just call them during your conditional period. You might call them the day after you move in.
I'm going to give a super quick horror story for anyone who's still listening. My house, which I most recently bought, I forgot to mention this and what's going on in my day-to-day. I'm renovating it, and I didn't get an inspection done, and now we're finding the roof structure is toast, and I'm actually cutting the entire roof off of my house as we speak. So get a home inspection.
Should have called Blue Nose. All right, thanks so much, guys. Keep listening. Keep commenting. Love you lots. Chat with you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out the episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and press the bell button for notifications. If this is your first time here, check out our back catalog for more episodes. Thanks so much for watching.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.